Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and this episode is going to be different because sometimes when you ask people what comes to mind when they hear the word sales, you get a lot of different words. But we've got Mike and Mike, two great sales professionals, and we're going to start with that very question. Mike, when you hear the word sales, what's the first word that comes to mind?
Thanks, Jody. The first word that comes to mind for me is connections. And that's about connecting people with a solution, a service, a product, a technology, what have you, that will help address a challenge that they're running into today. And by making those connections, you can make it easier for them to solve that challenge, whether it is speeding up the process because of an awareness you have about how your solution fits into the challenge that they're running into, or even connecting people with others.
I think like a lot of people, being a sales professional, when I hear the word sales, sometimes I think of it through the filter that I know a lot of people sort of think about sales, which is it has its fair share of negative stereotypes and associations. And I think quite often we reflect on horrible sales experiences that we have during, as buyers. And I'm a buyer just as frequently as I am a seller. And it's unfortunate to me that I see more of that bad behavior than I see in what I know can be the positive experience. So I kind of have to sort of put myself have to wear two hats, where from one perspective, I think about all the horrible experiences that we have as consumers or as business buyers and things of that nature. But I also know that I have a very positive view of what sales is. And that's because I know when it's done well, that it's something that's absolutely necessary in today's business. And it's something that everybody has a good experience with.
So what is the one word for you that comes to mind?
Well, the word that comes to mind for me is catalyst, really. When Mike and I started talking about how we would help companies, how we would help sales professionals, how we would help ourselves build this company, fundamentally, what is the one thing that we really want to be able to do? And as we were going through that exercise, we started talking about how we connect dots and how we introduce people, how we engage in conversations to help people discover how we can add value. And the word that came to mind for me was catalyst, because a catalyst is somebody that makes things happen, somebody that understands how they can walk people through a journey, how they can connect the right people, and how they can get results and make things happen. And that's something that, it takes business acumen, it takes tenacity, it takes perseverance, and a willingness to sort of go where people haven't been before.
And when you think about the name of our company, Catalyst Sale, that's really the foundation there. It's a part of our process is helping people identify those inside organizations who care about a solution that we're able to deliver. And I think one of the biggest challenges that sales professionals run into is this idea that they can understand their customer better than they understand themselves. You think about that as, how can somebody understand me as an individual better than I understand me? So through these questions and through gathering information, you create a story that works for the overall organization. You find people who care about a challenge that's happening inside an organization. You have a solution that can address that challenge, and now they can become that catalyst inside the organization to help drive the business, drive the opportunity, drive the project forward.
Yeah, it's always amazing to me when you work with a large enterprise client where you can see very clearly what the opportunity looks like. You understand from different perspectives through conversation how that problem is impacting a business from several different perspectives. And it's always pretty exciting when you can connect those dots and really get those people together. And it's always amazed me when you can take people that work in the same building for the same company, aligned with the mission and the vision of what they're doing as a company, but so entrenched in their day-to-day that they don't talk to each other about those problems. And I think one of the things that's really exciting as a sales professional is when you can be the person that connects those people inside of their own organization, provide that outside perspective and maybe some experience in solving a similar problem for someone before, and really seeing how an opportunity takes off from there. And if you weren't involved in that process to uncover that, those two people could coexist 5 offices apart and never have the conversations. And that's really the thing that we try and convey.
So the words I got were connection and catalyst, which brings me to the question that may be simple, maybe basic for you two with all of your experience, but what is sales?
Yeah, maybe we should have gotten Catalyst Connection. I didn't check that domain to see if it was available. We had to get Catalyst Sale as it was because Catalyst Sales was already registered. So today's domain world, you have to get creative. And we didn't want to come up with a name that nobody would remember. So figured, okay, Catalyst and Sale, that should probably work.
So Jody, when you talk about what is sales, what comes to mind for me, it's helping to paint the picture for a person who has a need, helping to paint the picture of how a solution that you have, whether it's technology, people, or service, how that solution can address the need that they have inside the organization. And Mike has mentioned a couple of different words. We talk about journeys, we talk about pathways, we talk about connections, we talk about catalysts. It's creating these stories through questions and gathering information and then delivering the solution in the context of what's important to the person that you're working with. So sales is problem solving. Sales is solution delivery. Sales is, we said before, connecting.
Sales can be beating your head against the wall every day because nobody seems to get it. I mean, that's part of the tenacity part of it, right? You have to be in a mindset to know that you're not always going to have immediate success and that you're going to have to just keep persisting. And so there is a level of tenacity and persistence that you can't get discouraged if things aren't moving forward. Eventually you'll crack the code and add value. But the willingness to know that if I do this enough times, eventually I'll have some success is really what keeps people driven to keep pushing forward.
Yep.
Why do people get into sales?
The easy answer there is the money. A lot of people look at it and say, sales is a great way to make money. They see the spiffs that are rolled out to people, cars, President's Club trips, steak knives, but that tends to be one of the first reasons. And I personally, I think that's a trap. I think when you start with the idea that it's about the money, you're now putting yourself before the customer. And it's very difficult to create a solution or deliver a solution that's important to the customer if you're putting yourself first. So I think the better answer is that people get into sales because they feel like or know that they have a knack for helping others solve problems and solve challenges faster. So there's this service-oriented component to it that I think drives the better sales reps. Now, Mike had talked about tenacity. You have to have a short memory. If you're in this because you think everybody is going to say yes, you're in the wrong business. If you're in this because you think it's going to be easy, you're in the wrong business. If everybody said yes and if it were easy, then people wouldn't be compensated as well as they are in this profession.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this question since you asked it. And I did a personal inventory and I thought, why did I decide I wanted to get into sales? I mean, when I went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to major in. I didn't really know what I wanted to do for a career. I ended up as a marketing major because there really isn't a sales discipline. But when I think about that, what really motivated me was it wasn't the money about I could make a lot of money as a sales rep, but I was also heavily influenced by my dad. He was a senior account executive for A.T.S. for about 25 years. And the light bulb for me kind of went off once when one of his accounts was a very major account, and he was invited to go to an AT&T event, and a limo showed up at our house. And the CEO of AT&T was in the limo taking my dad to this meeting. And I immediately did the math and I said, okay, my dad's in a sales role, but he's hanging out with the CEO of AT&T. And I know there's a lot of people between him and the CEO on the org chart, but what is it about a salesperson that makes them that relevant? And so I started talking to my dad about that and what he did and what he enjoyed in his sales role. And his forte was really about taking very, very major complex accounts and in the telecommunications industry, essentially making competitive wins. And he really thrived on the challenge of how do you take a customer that was previously on board that was disgruntled enough to leave and then go back and win that account back. And I was just fascinated by the teams that he would build and the complexities and the things that he did. I just thought it was really interesting that you're basically somebody that made things happen. And I think that's what resonated for me was in sales, you make things happen. And that's something to me that probably gives me more satisfaction than the ability to generate income. That just follows. If you do it really well, then it's pretty well known that as a good sales professional, you'll probably make a decent living. But for me, it was about how do you make things happen?
You mentioned tenacity that it takes to be consistently good salesperson, which makes me think if you've got to be tenacious, you're certainly going to struggle. Where do people struggle when it comes to sales?
I think we see that in our team. One of the things that we do is we are very aware of the teams that we build. I think it's easy to say, I want to hire a team of hunters and I want to turn them loose and they'll go off and have individual success. But one of the things that I think really helps our team is the fact that when we assemble a team, we look at how they complement each other's strengths. Because in sales, there'll be good times, there'll be bad times, there'll be times when you get lucky, there'll be opportunities that come together unexpectedly, whatever. But what you have to always remember as a salesperson is that the highs are never that high and the lows are never that low. And that if you can stay in that middle ground and stay grounded in what it is that you do every day, you'll know that if you do it over time, you'll be successful. And I think in our team environment, what I see that I really value in our organization is that they support each other, because there will be people that are having tremendous success and there will be people that are really struggling with not making progress on opportunities. And the fact that they help each other, realizing that all of it is cyclical and that in the long term, it's about staying the course. And if people can help each other through that process, that really makes for a solid, supportive team.
Mike hit on a really important point about there are going to be highs and there are going to be lows. We had someone who worked for us before, and I referred to her as our Eli Manning on the team. She never got too high. She never got too low. When people start struggling, or one of the biggest struggles I've seen is when people get into that groove of, I'm really good at doing what I'm doing. And there's this level of overconfidence. And as a result, they start delivering proposals or moving people through the sales process faster than they should. And they ultimately forget to qualify the opportunity. And they create major gaps in the solution that was delivered and how that aligns with the problem that was happening inside the organization. And ultimately, that leads to false starts in the sales process. So when I think of where people struggle, it's they either get too high on themselves, they get too overconfident, or they get really frustrated with the amount of time that it's taking to move people through the decision-making process, and they try to speed it up on their own.
Yeah, we had this conversation just this morning with one of our newer team members. And this is somebody that came from an environment where he was very successful. He knew what he could expect as an outcome based on how much activity and how much work he put into what he did. And coming here and working with a new startup that we're supporting right now, it's a completely different game with more unpredictability. And he didn't have that confidence of, well, if I do X, I'll see Y as a result. And we had to have a conversation about that today to say, don't overthink it, that we're doing the right things. We've been here before, and instill a little confidence in the fact that if he's doing the right things, if he's persistent, things will turn out okay, even though it's different from what he's experienced before. And I could just see in his face the relief of, maybe I'm overthinking this. Maybe I'm putting too much pressure on myself because I'm not getting the same result that I was getting in my previous role. Took a step back for a second and said, okay, yeah, this is a completely different adventure. And you're right, I'm doing the right things. I just have to stay at it. And, after a 15-minute conversation, he was right back at it. So sometimes we just need those sanity checks as well. I mean, Mike and I do that for each other all the time, where we just get so focused on something or a barrier that we have in front of us, and we help each other sort of have those breakthroughs.
We've talked about what sales is. We've heard that it's connection and you're a catalyst. Is there any other final words you want to give us about sales?
I think one of the things that I've seen out there that I'm intrigued by, because I'm a buyer as well, as a company owner and as somebody that, manages teams and buys a lot of tech products, subscription service products, and things like that, is the popularity of the SDR/AE combo. And I'll call it that. It's the sales development rep handoff to the account executive rep. And one of the things that I see happening in sales is the lack of thinking. Essentially, you end up being qualified as a buyer going through that process. And it's not a very enjoyable process because you can feel how you're being walked through the process they need to deliver ahead of what it is that you need as a buyer. And then after you've answered the 5 or 6 qualification questions, then you're handed off to an account executive who has really now just been trained to think about closing a qualified opportunity, and then they walk you through their process. And what I see is a severe lack of thinking or just engagement. When I have these conversations as a buyer, I like to think, because I'm a sales professional, I always try and be a good buyer, and I really try and make their job easy. But even when I communicate the things that I know would be helpful for them as a salesperson, there's just a lack of thought. And so that's one of the things that we work on at Catalyst too, is to really preserve that thinking process. And how do you understand the process from end to end and not just play a part in part of the process so that you can check a box or say that I've handed off a great lead.
And Jody, the thing I'd add to that is that it's not an assembly line. This isn't okay, I have passed through this part and now I get the widget added. And then I pass through this next piece and someone's got to add a couple of bolts. And then I pass through this next piece and this is where the cogs get added into this component. People can leave with one thought here. Sales is a thinking process. And I know you've said that in the intro, and we'll lead off with that as we go through these podcasts going forward. But sales is a thinking process. It is not one size fits all. It is not structured. It's about operating within some guideposts that will help you be more effective at what you do. So I'd leave it with, it's not an assembly line, and it is a thinking process.
Well, thank you, Mike and Mike. I know I've learned a lot deeper about what sales is. If you want to learn more, you can visit catalystsale.com or follow us on Twitter at catalystsale. You can also find Mike and Catalyst Sale on LinkedIn. Thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale podcast. If you want to share this podcast with your colleagues, you can find it on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play.